Greetings. Welcome to the Dragon Con Urban Fantasy Track author interview series. And I am joined tonight by the gentleman who has been on more virtual panels for media than anyone else. And I'm quite sure that that's true. And I think almost every single one. So thank you. And let's have you introduce yourself, wonderful Marx Pyle, to our viewers, please.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Marx Pyle. I'm an author. I'm a filmmaker, podcaster, and other stuff. And I like martial arts and walking on beaches. It's great.
Well, there you go. Now, the question is, though, do you ever do martial arts on the beach?
Sometimes. It's pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I've seen other people do it, so that's why I was curious. But yeah, it seems as though as long as it's not like freezing cold or something, that while you're out there, that it might actually be a nice location to do it in. So, yeah. You're a man of many talents, and we will talk about some of those other activities and interests a little bit later. But I did want to. I do have some specific questions that are geared towards your life as an author. And my first question that I always ask everyone is that, were you actually into sci-fi and fantasy as a child or a young adult, or is that something that came along a little bit later in life?
Yes, I definitely was. From as far back as I can remember. I started reading comics probably before I could really read well. And then I would read sci-fi fantasy books and comic books and anything I get my hand on. So, and of course, watch a lot of sci-fi TV shows.
Do you remember what the first thing you ever watched that was sci-fi was? I'm just curious because I've never asked anybody that, but
Tough. I know I saw in reruns like the original Star Trek. I know that for sure. That would be definitely one of the oldest. And I remember watching as a kid at a pretty young age, the animated Hobbit movie. So that was definitely an early one.
Cool.
That's about as far back as I could think for sure. That, of course, cartoons and stuff. If you count.
Oh, yeah.
G.I. Joe.
Oh, okay. For me, the cartoon that was close to my heart as a kid, and I remember being like 5 years old and being into it, was Casper the Friendly Ghost. So I guess my interest started early as well. Now, the first published work of yours was your Television on the Wild Wild Web book that came out in 2014, and what can you tell us about that? What the focus of that was, and how you came to actually produce the book itself.
Yeah, that's over there behind my head.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, that's a traditionally published book. It's nonfiction by Michael Weezy Productions. They do like Save the Cat is another book. It's probably the most famous book, or one of the most famous. It's a nonfiction book. After I got out of film school, start working on film projects, especially with web series. Web series was really big for a while. I mean, they're still around, but they're really big as a way for independent creators to create stories, especially series. And I created a web series. It was called Reality on Demand. I worked on other people's web series, or co-produced or worked on others like Aiden 5 and Book of Dallas and other ones out there. And I also I used to write for Sci-Fi Pulse, writing about web series also. So anyway, I ended up interviewing like 90 plus web series creators. So I used a lot of that knowledge in my own training, my own thoughts, and trying to give kind of a book that would help out web series creators and also indie filmmakers out with creating their projects, getting them out there, marketing, and also had a lot of information on early research and experimentation with crowdfunding and stuff too, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, that kind of stuff. It would eventually lead to me like being able to join. There's an organization. It's kind of merged with another organization in LA now, so it doesn't really exist, I don't think, exactly under the same name anymore, but it used to be the International Academy of Web Television. Felicia Day was like one of the founding board members or whatever back in the early days of that. And I was on that board for a little while. Not too long after that book came out, as I made more connections and got in that world more. So it's one of the things I love, writing stories, but I also like teaching sometimes, or helping other people be able to create their stuff too. And this is a great way to do it. It also helps when you teach people, you learn more too, by helping teach it. If you have to communicate it out to people to learn, you suddenly understand it way better.
Exactly. You have to, when you're explaining it yourself, sometimes you have to ask yourself, wait a minute, why is it that way? And it's, yeah.
Yep.
So, and I'm sure that, as you said, you kind of built this, or you used your experience of talking to a lot of different people, all these different connections that you had. And then probably after the book came out, I'm sure that led to even more connections with people. So it sounds as though it came around for you at just the right time. Now, I'm sure that in between 2014 and 2021, that you were writing things, but the next thing that you actually published for public consumption anyway was through the Kindle Vella program, which I also wanted to ask you about. But that's the Obsidian Archives, and that came out in October of 2021. And what I'm curious about the Kindle Vella program, and I know that it's winding down and going away, but what led you to be interested in releasing that particular story in that way?
I thought it was a cool way to get a story out, because there's something about series I like, and that's kind of a cool way to, and sizable like episode chunks to give out a story. Now, I had already worked on that as a novel in grad school, and I looked at the format of it, and I felt like most of it worked really well for that format. The way I did chapters fit a episodic type format pretty well. And it's like first person, but it's kind of an ensemble, so it bounces around to a few different points of view. And I just felt like, I think this could work. And it was new, fresh, Vella was, and I'm always, I like to experiment and do different things, see what happens. And so I tried it out and to see what happened. So
now, do you plan to release the entirety of it as one volume at some point in time?
Yeah, the full volume novel, seasonal, whatever you want to call it, it's like 170,000 words or so, will come out later this year. It's probably going to be in May. So I haven't locked it down 100% until I wanted to get these anthologies done first, or out there first, before I locked it in. But that's where I'm aiming at right now. So it's all done. It just I just have to finalize some edits. I had a second editor come on board, Catherine Dow, who's if you read any anthologies, you might have seen some of her stories, and she was the second author on there, and helped kind of tighten up a few things and helped out another perspective, and so I just got to finish a few of those things, and then I got to tweak the cover art a little bit for the size final page count, and then we're good to go. So
sounds great. Now, what is well, I have a bone to pick with you, so I will do that a little bit later. But but then no, it's not a serious one, but anyway, it's more curiosity than anything else.
Sure.
But for those who maybe are unfamiliar with the Obsidian Archives, could you give kind of your elevator pitch of what is the series about?
So it's like Obsidian Archives is sort of like Mission Impossible meets urban fantasy. So in that story, Obsidian Monsters, it's about this organization called Obsidian that kind of is like helps protect the Earth from threats, and also helps keep the peace between different secret factions of like shifters and vampires and etc. And they come up against a threat that because of historical reasons are predominantly human focused right now, but they're forced to have to bring in other worlders, other supernatural beings into a team for a specific threat that requires it. And so an Obsidian agent, codenamed Grey Wolf, is tasked to put together a team, and they're kind of an oddball team in a way, coming together from different backgrounds and different factions. And they're really all kind of outsiders in their own factions. So you get like a were jaguar, you get like a half demon warrior from this girl who's been raised by this holy order, et cetera, et cetera. And they get together and go on some cool adventures. Lots of action scenes and some story arcs between multiple characters, but primarily Grey Wolf, Cade, and Maria. So
Yeah, your description of them as oddball, that's spot on. Yeah, they are.
And there's some Lovecraftian stuff mixed in there because I like a little Lovecraftian.
Gotta throw that in.
I actually, because I worked on another project that was Lovecraftian, a film project, I became friends with Britton Watkins, who is a conlang expert, a constructed language expert. And
okay.
I worked with him to make Aklo, which is one name it goes by, kind of like that you hear, like the fake language that's in like Lovecraftian lore.
Okay.
There's only a few official, like real examples or whatever from Lovecraft. But we worked together, and he put together a language and stuff, and I used a little bit of that. Like if a lot of spells, like a cast, use that. So it's a little extra touch, world building.
Yeah, there you go. Well, when it's urban fantasy, that is always going to play a part, right?
Yep.
Now, very, very soon after Obsidian Monsters came out on Kindle Vella, I think it was only maybe a month later or so, you had your first anthology that you edited and had some work in yourself, that Dragons of a Different Tale, Unusual Dragon Tales, that came out. And there we go. Lovely. Yeah.
Visual. Yeah.
So this was your first experience with an anthology. Mm-hmm. And what can you tell people about what they can expect from that anthology? I know that they're different, the stories are different, and they have different approaches to dragons, but there are probably a couple of through lines that go as part of the anthology. So how would you describe it?
So I would describe it as I challenge these authors to create stories with dragons, but that go either put them in genres or worlds that you usually never see a dragon in, or go counter the archetypes and expectations of a dragon, or both. Oh. And so we have like J. Thorne wrote a story of dragons, post-apocalyptic future with dragons in them. Julie and I, my wife Julie, we co-wrote a story called Wild Beasts of the West. That's an alternate history of the Wild West, and it's about this female protagonist who has this group and is hired to take on these rustlers, but they're all like, instead of riding horses, they ride dragons. Okay. And so that ended up being a really fun kind of Wild West love type, romancy type story too. So and there are all sorts of stuff. We have a story with dragons that are so huge that they're like living spaceships and stuff. We have one dragon that's as large as a continent that helped kind of end the world in a way. And we have little dragons with a cute YA story in there by Sophia. And we have a funny story with modern day with dragons that has to do with dragon hard rock. We have a song and everything.
Oh wow! Okay.
From the band Dragon Fraggin'. So
that's great.
Yeah.
And so, some little added perks. Now I'm sure that and you picked good timing. I mean, there's never a bad time for dragons, but you seem to have gotten just ahead of the curve where the whole, where a lot of dragon oriented stuff was coming out. So what do you think some of the, I guess, kind of the fascination, I suppose you could say, that dragons have for people? I mean, and of all types, just as you're demonstrating by the, more or less the theme of this anthology. But what do you think the big appeal of them might be?
I think they're just, when you think of mythological beast, I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. There's just something primal about them. I don't know if it's because we think of, maybe we're hardwired about dinosaurs or something, or ancients, or not, but there's just something that appeals with them for fantasy and just in general. So similar appeals that, like, for dinosaurs, but also just a epic beast kind of thing. And I think it's a creature that, what I liked about doing this story was, even though this creature, everybody knows what a dragon is, it can mean a little bit different to different people in different cultures. And then also, I think there's a lot of richness to explore that hasn't really been fully explored, at least not in popular media yet. So I think there's a lot of room to put your mark on it and explore it. So it's a little hard to do that vampires, for example.
Right, yeah.
But I think there's still plenty of room to experiment with dragons. So
that's true. That's true. Now, the next one that you did came out not too long after that one, I guess, and that was in 2022, is The Tales of Monstrosity, Monsters, Myths, and Miscreants. I love that title, by the way. That's great.
Oh, thank you.
I
brainstormed it with the different authors. A couple different authors had pieces of that, and we put it together. So it worked out well.
Yeah. And so what is kind of the background or focus on for that particular anthology? Oh, and there's the cover. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
And we got the forward by Tim Wagner, who you might know.
Oh, yeah. He's
a great guy. So that one was, I wanted to do a book about monsters, in general, in folklore, but not like your typical monsters. I didn't want a vampire or werewolf or a zombie, any of the big ones that everybody does. I wanted them to pick, lesser known monsters, like Chupacabra or Baba Yaga or whatever, and then put a twist on them. So it ended up being like mostly urban fantasy or horror type stories. So not quite as crazy in genre as the dragon story is, but we got to explore a lot of really cool stuff in here. Lots of cool stories. Michael Laron, I was really excited to get him on board. He's a very prolific indie author. He's also a very prolific nonfiction writer about writing. And Scott A. Johnson was one of my mentors in Seton Hill University. So, and W.H. Horner was also, especially for editing. And they both wrote really great stories. And this is the first story that has a story from Marissa Wolf, you probably know from DragonCon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she wrote a really good urban fantasy story with a Gorgon Medusa type character. That's sort of that meets like noir detective kind of story. So
right. Okay.
Yeah, so lots of really good stuff here. And then this one, I have a story in here that is called Rebel Without a Cause. It does take place in Obsidian Archives universe. It's new. They mention some characters and stuff from Obsidian Monsters, but they're mostly new characters. Apuka named Rebel is the main character, and sort of like I hadn't watched John Wick yet or anything, but it's sort of like got a John Wick action vibe. So it's kind of like a shape-shifting John Wick, I guess, in a way. And
okay.
with more jokes.
Oh yeah, okay.
John Wick doesn't really make jokes too much.
He's too busy killing people, but yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. He's got a guy, he works with this goblin and named Oz, and it's basically a lot in the Fey criminal underworld kind of stuff within the Obsidian Archives universe. So and that's one of the cool things too, is some of the stories some of them tie into either existing worlds or worlds from other anthologies. As we've gone through, we've kind of fleshed out some different storylines.
Okay. Now, then you followed that one up with Lost Tales Beyond Monstrosity, which came out in 2023. And how is it? Is it kind of a continuation of the first one, or is it, kind of a combination of that and some other things, or you had too much good stuff, you couldn't fit it all into the
So Tales of Monstrosity was the first of the anthologies we did as a Kickstarter. I went ahead and put that together as a Kickstarter. So it was a great learning experience. And we had so many stretch goals. I think at first I was like, oh, I didn't think we'd get that much support. And I was like, oh, once we get $100 or something beyond this level, we'll have a stretch goal. Like they're too small, and we blew past them really fast. So then I had to come up with new stretch goals and make sure I made them really stretchy, really stretchy. And so one of them was kind of like a little bonus anthology with some stories. They're all from authors in Tales of Monstrosity, but the stories aren't necessarily monsters. I have like a sci-fi comedy, like First Contact alien story in it. And we have a few, there's a Jeff Burns story. It's a continuation, like a straight up sequel to the one in Tales of Monstrosity.
Oh, okay.
And also Marissa Wolf, I believe her story is sort of like a prequel in her story that's in Tales of Monstrosity. So there are some that tie in directly and some don't.
Okay.
So yeah. So that was a cool bonus thing that then we could go ahead and also sell. We get to the backers, but then also sell. So
yeah. Now your next one is coming up sometime, I believe. Is it in March or May? The Once Upon a Twisted Time.
Yeah. So that's this right here. So this is volume 1. I don't have volume 2 in print on me right now. I had to ship them all out. I got them on order. To all the backers and stuff.
Yes. Okay. I was going to say the subtitle: Fairy Tales, Folklore, and Fables Reimagined.
Yes.
Oh, yes. And
there's actually 2 volumes. This is volume 1. This is by far the bigger one. And volume 2 is Once Upon a Twisted Time. Yeah. And so we ended up, I stretched as a Kickstarter, and I stretched it out, but instead of doing it like I did with Lost Tales, it was truly like the author story. They're basically like the author stories kind of on hold to see if we, if people would back them to make a new book. And so like the second volume has a really awesome story that it's not quite a novella, but it's a pretty long story, somewhere between a short story and novella, that is co-written by Marissa Wolf and Melissa Olthoff. So that was the first time she wrote with us, and I think both of them have been DragCon a lot. So we have in this one, like Mike Laurent came back. Bobby Nash, you may or may not know, he goes DragCon quite a bit. He writes a lot of pulp stories and a kind of a mix of different genres. He wrote a really cool, in this one, story that called Real Boy, that's like Pinocchio in space.
Yes,
like it's really good.
Seeing that, yeah.
Yeah, we have Sean Gibson, who's came back he worked on Dragons, and he writes really cool. He writes really good comedy, fantasy comedy, and he kind of wrote a story. It's crosses over Robin Hood with Scrooge. So
combo.
Yeah, well, I guess I should mention. I guess we kind of mentioned already, but it's like taking fairy tales, folklore, and fable stories, and then putting twists on them, especially genre twists, as you can kind of tell on the cover. There's a spaceship in addition to kind of this fantasy world, so they both kind of have that kind of twist on them. So like Pinocchio in space, and some of the other stories we have in here. So we have like a kind of a Snow White story, but it's on Mars, for example, and a big mix of different stories in here that are really cool. Some from we had Peach in volume 2, Peach Samurai. It's like a Japanese lore that's reimagined. Some different Grimm fairy tale stories that aren't as well known or reimagined in here. Lots of cool stuff. So, and my story in this one is Obsidian Archives.
Yes,
So,
it is. Yes. Good one too. I like that a lot.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, Deanna Diaz, who's one of the main characters in Obsidian Monsters, isn't it? So she's a square jaguar bounty hunter character. It's really cool. Like she ends up, we end up meeting her like mentor that got her into bounty hunting stuff, and she's a fairy godmother, which is something I probably never would have done if it wasn't this theme of the story. But it's the theme has shifters in it, but I put the shifter lore within the story of Three Little Pigs. So
it all works out quite well. It's
yeah.
I mean, it all blends, and it sounds wacky, and it is, but it also works really well. So
it all works.
Yeah, I give it a big thumbs up. I quite enjoy that.
You'll appreciate Diaz. That character, when I first made her up, she of course became her own character as I wrote her. But her initial idea in my brain, like trying to think of her dialogue and stuff, it was like a Latina Winona Earp kind of character.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Points for the Winona reference too. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's actually, I could see that. Well, if Kevin ever watches this, he'll be going out to get your story.
And one thing that's cool about these anthologies, they're a little different than other anthologies, is also I asked the authors to write kind of like behind the scenes, like essays at the end of it. So they give a little bit of commentary about their stories. So I think that's kind of cool. And then also, like if you're a backer and stuff, you get other extras sometimes too, like audio commentaries and other things. So some of those go out broader. Some of them are kind of just isolated to the backers. But
the background stuff I could see as being very useful to to people who are really into that whole idea. So or the overall arc, the overall theme of the anthology, I could see where that would be especially of interest to people who are like, okay, how did they do this? Why did they do this? Or, why did they choose to do it this way?
Yeah, I think it was sort of like that educational nonfiction side of me, thinking like, well, somebody might want to learn some lessons and stuff. And then also, if you're a super fan, I know I wouldn't mind it having some behind the scenes of a Stephen King book or whatever story, and learn more about like what they did. I mean, I love them on DVDs and stuff, like Blu-rays and stuff, like on Supernatural. My favorite TV shows, right? Supernatural or Buffy and stuff. And then, but then now I think it's really useful now because I feel like it makes you more of a human connection with the fan base. Whenever now there's so much AI stuff in the mix, and so it helps you stand out a little bit. So in that way.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, because they know it's the actual person telling them something rather than some machine. Now, so this, my next questions, well, that's actually a few of them kind of together, is that obviously from the topics that you've chosen to include in in these anthologies and in your own work personally, you use a lot of folklore. You have a big interest in folklore, whether it's as background or using the actual creatures. And so I have a few questions that are part of that whole topic there. And one is, do you have a favorite fairy tale? Do you have a favorite creature from folklore? And what about your sources? Are there some good sources that you recommend for people that may be interested in learning more?
So favorite fairy tale is really tough. For what, I don't know if I would say it's my favorite, but it always stands out as just a simple story that I knew as a kid. It was Three Little Pigs. So, right. So that's why it stood out to me at first. But I think there's lots of really great fairy tales. I wasn't as drawn to the princess stories as much as I was a kid, but so I was more about the adventures and stuff like that. I think Pinocchio was definitely stood out, and then even though it's not technically a fairy tale, but it kind of is a modern fairy tale with the Hobbit and everything. I was fascinated by that as a kid too. But I really appreciate I think my mom was a librarian, so I'm pretty sure I remember as a kid. I don't know if I have any of those. I don't have them here. Maybe she still has them, but I remember her giving me books of fairy tale collections and fables and stuff like that when I was a kid. What was the other questions?
Creature. Do you have a favorite creature from folklore? Something that you always enjoy reading about, no matter what?
I mean, vampires are always, or different versions of vampires, different cultures. Like Filipino vampires are very different than vampires from other worlds. I think the vampire is just something. Any variation of it is really fascinating. And then also, for some reason, I find Baba Yaga or Baba. How you pronounce it?
Yaga, yeah.
Yeah, Baba Yaga. Yeah, that's how you pronounce it. As Lost Girl taught me. It's official pronunciation. I always find that concept interesting too, because this idea of this old, this kind of hag, supernatural witch type woman who has this, especially the iconic house on chicken legs, just such an odd concept. It's very iconic. So the Slavic, myths and stuff are really wild. So
yeah, with cool. A house with chicken legs, that's pretty wild. And do you have some favorite sources that you've used for learning more about folklore, or some of the stories behind? Well, I mean, fairy tales come from folklore, but are there some stories that are some sources that you find particularly useful and that you would recommend to people?
Yeah, if I ever see a book, like I got a book not that long ago from the library. Actually, it's over there somewhere. It's called it's the Fairy Bible, so it's called, and it's just all about fairy lore and stuff. It's like illustrations. So any of those kind of things I always enjoy. I think especially as a kid, I played a lot of tabletop role-playing games, so you get the monster manuals and stuff. And then I would read these monster manuals, and a lot of times the monsters are based on at least a little bit of real folklore monsters. And so then I would want to read and learn more about the real thing, and where the source material is from. I think one that just pops in my head, because I don't have anything really handy, but one really great resource that's on top of mind is on YouTube, the PBS Storied YouTube channel. They have a show. They have a few really good shows, but they have one that's called Monstrum. And
okay, yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Dr. Emily Zarka hosts that. Had her on our podcast show, Genre Entertainment, not too long ago. Actually, she was kind enough to write a foreword to this book here.
I saw,
yeah. So I know, like, it was. I actually, with Tales of Monstrosity, I actually suggested some of the authors go check out Monstrum if they weren't sure, if they were having trouble thinking of any monsters, because she really explores all types of lore around the world and stuff. So so that's a really good one. That's a really fun one to watch. She has tons of episodes, and they have other stuff on Story too that's kind of it's sideways related to it, so you can find other cool stuff on there.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to go check those out. I've heard of them, but I don't believe I've ever actually, seen any of them. Now, heading back into Obsidian Archives for a little bit, who were some of your favorite characters to write? At least so far, the ones that,
Yeah, I'll talk about the ones that were on Vela, at least, which is a good chunk of the main cast. But
right.
Yeah, it's hard. They're all like really cool. I think the one that has the coolest story arc, eventually, when you read the whole book, is Maria Church, who's she's a lot of fun. She's kind of got elements of like the Chosen One archetype, kind of like Buffy in a way, but she's very different than a Buffy in personality and abilities and stuff. She was raised, she's like half demonic, like, and she's raised by this religious order that protects the world from demons and stuff. And she's trained all these martial arts and trained all these different ways to fight creatures and stuff. And what's really kind of cool about her in a way is that she's kind of taught to not like herself, think of her as a monster, part of a monster. and that she has to redeem herself by killing monsters. And whenever she joins with this team of otherworlders and stuff, she starts to realize really quickly that, like, oh, well, they're not all monsters. Like, the only vampire, only shifter she's ever faced was, something that's feral or murderous or whatever. It's like the only human you ever met was like cannibal, barbarians or something.
Kind of like the beginning of Supernatural, when that's what they were dealing with. Yeah.
Yep. And so she has to learn, like, the world's a lot more complex than she realized, and she has to learn that and rethink a lot of things, her point of view and stuff about herself and about the world, and also balance her own issues with trying to work with a team and stuff. It ends up being a really cool arc after a while. There's a really cool scene. I don't think it was a novella, but there's a really cool scene. There's these vampires and stuff. It came out really great. A lot of people tell me, like, that after that scene, they became their favorite character. And so anyway, you'll see that soon in May.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're waiting. Which is
and I get to really explore all the martial arts stuff with her, because she's cross-trained a bunch of styles that, of course, I know also. And then she's also got this thing where she's half Hispanic. I'm half Hispanic too, so I play around a little bit with that. And then and she's not Catholic, but she has this sort of Christian-ish religion that the order is part of. They're kind of like their pre-Christian type religion. And so I can make some commentary or thoughts about my own. I was raised Catholic and stuff, so I get to, like, seed in a lot of things that way. But so yeah, makes it a little more personal.
Yeah. Well, and she's a very interesting character, that's for sure. I look forward to hearing more, which is a good segue into my next question, which you partially answered a little bit earlier, about when can we expect more in that world. And when I said I had a bone to pick with you, it was because I had read the first couple back when they first came out, but then got buried under other things and didn't go back to it, even though I told myself I need to go back to this, because this was before they were all out at once. So anyway, so recently I was reading them, and then when I got to the end of 10 and they were like, you've finished, and I'm like, seriously? Because for some reason I thought there were 12. And so I was like, but no, what happened? And I thought, is there something wrong with my Amazon account? Because I was reading stuff on my tablet, and sometimes it was on my laptop, sometimes on my tablet. So then I went and checked, and I was like, well, I'll have to ask Marx about this. But so yeah, be forewarned, people. You do have it's a cliffhanger, but not in the traditional sense. But it's I guess you could say that, yeah, there's a lot of expectation coming up. So and so there will be more, and when?
It's like, see it as a preview, because right now, until Vela's down, the first 10 are free now. They weren't free before, but they are now. And so it's a preview for the novel that's about to come out. So at this point,
but that is when now? Could you remind us?
It should be in May. So I'll release after the second volume comes out, probably a week or two after that, for sure, I will release the official date, because at that point I can take a breath and be like, okay, I can get this, all finished. So.
Oh, come on. You cannot take a breath, because you took people's breaths away by doing that. So, yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to finally see, show the whole story. And then what happens after that. I'm already working on, I'm starting to work on a story that follows one of the characters after that too, and a different story. So, and I got some other stuff, I'm working on right now. So it's a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, lots of things cooking in your brain. Now, I do want to ask you something about Cade, though, because this idea always intrigues me. Is if Cade could make a guest appearance in any other UF series, just whether it was for a chapter, whether he visited for the whole book and had to team up with someone, who could you see him doing that with? What other urban fantasy series?
I mean, one of my favorites is Dresden Files, so I think that'd be great, and they're very different personalities, so it'd be interesting.
Oh my gosh, would it ever? Yeah.
That would be a fun matchup. But yeah. And then if it was a fighting thing, Iron Druid, that's a really cool one from a fighting perspective with two characters. Yeah, I think so. And of course, I think he'd fit more in this supernatural world than necessarily Buffy. Also, if you're talking about TV.
Okay, yeah, like media. Yeah, now I could see him being like a recurring character on Supernatural that they would run into every once in a while, somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
well,
I don't know if you noticed. Maybe, I don't know if it's in those novellas or not, but if not, it's really soon after that. They talk about different categories, like people who come out of factions. Like, you're either in the factions, you're in the know, basically, what's going on, or you don't.
right.
Or you're the people that kind of in between, where you're kind of like, I know monsters are real, but you don't realize the grander picture of it. And
Right.
so
The
there's
extent,
ones, the ones who like forget the rules and do whatever they want. They're like rogues. And then the ones who are like, I'm fighting monsters, but I don't really know, the broader picture of everything. I put in, like, I call them waywards. That's my little nod to Supernatural.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. Okay.
So
Well, that that makes a lot of sense. And it's a nice little nugget for people who are fans of the show.
yeah.
Now, who would you say have been some of the most influential writers for you? I mean, people that you have really enjoyed, throughout your life, that you feel as though, not that you were trying to copy or even emulate necessarily, but just people that you thought, dang, they really do this well. I wonder if I can do something somewhat similar, or something to that effect.
Yeah. I think if we were talking about TV, I don't think it'll be surprising to you, like Eric Kripke, and then for making a plan and creating foundation of characters and stuff and mythology, and then Joss Whedon. I know he's not, the most popular guy right now, but from his perspective of his ability to kind of balance humor and drama and stuff, I think is really well. Him and his writing team of other people like Maureen Oxon and Dave Fury and such back then. So I think I really was impressed by all that, and definitely strive to do something like that. James Gunn, who does a great job with ensemble characters and stories like Guardians of the Galaxy and the Suicide Squad and stuff. He does a great job taking oddball characters and giving them all kind of a spotlight enough where you get to really know about them, care about them.
Sure.
And then in books, of course, I really like Jim Butcher's. I like the way he reveals the world in a way. Like, he reveals pieces, and it makes you addicted to wanting to know more.
Right.
So I love that, and his dialogue too. He's very dialogue rich, I think. And I'm pretty dialogue heavy too. I like that, and with Jim Butcher's work, I appreciate the mysteries, especially in the early books that Laurel K. Hamilton did with Anita Blake, and that was one of the first. That, and then Dresden Files were my first urban fantasy novels that I read. I was looking for something for that Buffy fix, and that's what I found.
Right, yeah. Well, you found them in those things, yes.
Oh yeah. So those are some really big ones. When I want some scare or inspiration from scare, Stephen King, of course, not just because of the horror aspects of it, but I think he's really, really good at just taking ordinary people and really bringing them to life, and really playing around with social commentary in lots of different ways too. That's creative, different. Like the story of The Mist is one of my favorite stories of his, and that's a short story, and he explores a lot about humanity and how humans deal with, or can, in both positive and negative ways, deal with not tragedy, but like under pressure and stuff like that, and explores lots of interesting things. some of the old weird fiction people, like Lovecraft. Lovecraft's super racist and a little crazy, but but him, and also the people that motivated him, because they have some pretty. There's some stuff that he gets credit for that other authors before him created. He got the imagery from, or ideas from. That weird fiction stuff is really interesting. What they do with some of those stories. The Great God Pan, for example, is a really funky story. There's some really interesting ideas there that they're explored, yeah, that's some of the stuff out there.
Yeah, well, that's quite a repertoire of good influences, or that give you a solid background from different angles. They're not all just from one area. So that probably explains a lot about some of your interests too, right? Yeah. Now, my next question is a craft question, because, and I like to ask people this one just because I'm always curious. People have different answers, but do you prefer quiet when you write, or do you like some kind of background sound?
I like sometimes when I write nonfiction, I kind of like it quiet, or I like to, that nonfiction book, I wrote like half of that at Starbucks or the library. And sometimes that background dull noise was kind of cool for that. But when it comes to fiction, I really like music. I kind of put together over time different soundtracks of songs that really make me feel certain emotions, and then I might listen to those while I'm writing a scene that's got that kind of emotion or something. Yeah, so like one of the things we do with those anthologies as stretch goals is I asked the authors to put together like a song that they think might fit with their story, and we put together a little, unofficial Spotify playlist or something for the back. Right. So those are kind of fun. But yeah, there's certain music I listen to. Like there's certain music I listened to when I wrote Obsidian Monsters that definitely helped me out. And I've had a few short stories, some short stories that I think came out really, really great that aren't published yet, that I think were very emotional, that happened where I almost can tie it to a song in a way. So.
Oh, wow. That's great. Okay. Yeah. Now, for my last question, I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about your podcast that you mentioned, the Genretainment, and let our viewers know about this other endeavor that takes up a lot of your time. I'm not sure. Do you actually sleep, Marx? Do you sleep?
Sometimes. Yeah, I do lots of projects. So for a long time, I've done a podcast called Genretainment with my wife Julie, where we've interviewed creators, a lot of filmmakers, authors, writers, etc., game designers too. Since, gosh, I don't know how long it's been. It's been a long time, and we've had our hiatuses here and there, but we've had a lot of episodes, a lot of people that we've met. And so Genretainment, we also do a new thing now occasionally called Genre Talk on the channel, where Julie and I talk about, like, review a TV show or something.
Oh, okay.
Like we just reviewed Cobra Kai, talking about Cobra Kai right before the last episodes come out. So that's fun stuff for us to do together too. But we have guests on there on Genretainment, Genre Talk. That's on Spotify and other podcast channels. It's also through a feed, goes to our the Cabot Crossing Publishing is a publishing company that I put together, and Cabot Crossing's got a YouTube channel. And at first, all I did on the YouTube channel was I started up for Tales of Monstrosity when we were doing Kickstarter. I'm like, I need to get some videos, I need to do something, and I did interviews with the authors and stuff, and I didn't really do anything else with it. And then when I came around for this Kickstarter and anthology, I was like, oh, I'll do that again. But then I was like, you know what? I should do something more with this. And then I realized I could put the podcast feed to it. And then I was like, why stop there? Because I have so much time.
And who needs to sleep, right? So,
yeah. I also, another thing I like, and I've liked since I was at least 12 or 13, is tabletop role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Shadowrun, etc. Buffy the Vampire Slayer has a really awesome role playing game that was out a few years back. Actually, I play tested it, so I was one of the play testers in some of the later books.
Good for you.
So I always enjoy that. I think that helped me in some ways learn, or at least explore in a different way, world building and character creation. I think in a way than your traditional, ways of learning it. And so I thought I'll do some tabletop role playing game stuff because I'm thinking about making some game stuff, maybe sitting in archives. Who knows?
Yeah, there you go. That would be perfect.
And so we started doing actual plays of different role-playing games, which is called genre play, and then it kind of branched out from there. We have Woody Arnold is another person that works with he's a comic book creator and also a gaming person, and we do Art of the Game, where we talk about role-playing game tips and advice and stuff and topics, and then we have other shows too that are a little bit more part-time, like Behind the Dice, where we kind of discuss different games we're playtesting. We talk about, we also have a newer one called Fixing the Game, where me and Greg, who's kind of a technical producer and all this stuff on the channel, we debate kind of tongue-in-cheek different gaming stuff. It's kind of like if you debated which is better, Buffy or Supernatural.
Oh, hey, you brought that up, not me.
Oh no, why did I do that? We have that. We have a lot of shows. If you like tabletop role-playing games, you definitely would like to check it out, most likely. And then, but also, if you like to hear my voice and my wife's voice, or us on video, actually, we're doing genretainment on video now also, talking to different creators. There's genretainment. And then, of course, we're always going to have promotions and stuff about our different books on that channel, too. So I got to work on a trailer or something for Obsidian Archives release.
Okay. Well, it sounds as though you have your work cut out for you, but I just want to make sure that the book comes out in May.
Yes, it will.
As close to May as possible, because I have to know what else is going on with people. Don't leave me hanging, man.
I'll make sure you know all about it. I'll let you know.
Thank you. Well, Marx, it has been such a pleasure to be able to talk with you about all of this. Some of the things I knew a little bit about, but it's been nice to spend time talking to you about this side of your creative life as well. And I want to thank you so much for being here. We want to thank our viewers, for being supporters of the track, and we hope that you will check out Marx's work. Please stay tuned for some other virtual content we have coming up in March. I will have an author interview with the husband and wife duo Ilona Andrews, and we will also have a fan panel discussion of chaos, on which you will see Marx again. So yes, we do have some programming coming up. So stay tuned to our Facebook page for announcements of those things, please, and most likely to our Bluesky account as well. But Marx, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time here and your longtime support of the track, and how always willing you are to do, all the different programming for me. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. So
certainly. And thanks everyone for watching. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.